So in the Constitution, men get to vote, men get to own land, represent themselves in business decisions. They completely ignore women. They don't write about them at all. But we do know that they define women as those who should be docile, controlled by the men in their lives, that they should not vote. Every law they wrote as a result of that comes from those beliefs. Our educational system, our healthcare system, everything comes back to that original social order.
Some beliefs are so woven into the fabric of American society that we aren't even aware how much they dictate our experience, until someone wakes us up by shining a light on a very different truth. Today, that voice is Anna Malaika Tubbs, author of the groundbreaking new book, Erased, that I strongly encourage every American to read. With clarity and compassion, Anna reveals how patriarchy has shaped our history and continues to control our present, and why naming it is the first step toward healing, liberation, and evolution. This is a conversation about our innate power, potential, and what it takes to rewrite the story we've inherited into one of true democracy, freedom, and equality. My work is about healing through reconnecting people with their intuition and the innate wisdom within to guide them towards the vital creative beings they were born to be. Anna's profound work has made me realize that becoming aware of the patriarchy on which this country was intentionally built is an absolutely necessary step in reclaiming our sovereignty and accessing true healing on the individual, societal, and global level. Anna, one word you'd use to describe Erased.
Empowering.
Yes, I would agree. A woman in history you wish more people knew about.
It's hard for me to choose one because I wrote a book about three, so I have to say Alberta King, Berta Spaldwin, and Louise Little from my first book.
And tell us just a little bit more about that book because it's so important.
Thank you so much. It's the mothers of MLK Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin.
Amazing. Your go-to practice when you feel overwhelmed by the weight of the work that you're doing, which is so important.
Sitting down with my kids and seeing the world through their eyes.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
What gives you the most hope right now?
Responses to national injustice, when people are standing up together and saying, we can do this differently. We don't have to be afraid. Let's come together. Beautiful.
And one word your kids would use to describe you.
Ooh, funny, hopefully. I'm gonna go with funny.
Okay, good. I love it. Oh my gosh, you're the mother of three. You have so many degrees, and you are just this. I mean, I'm just so in awe of how young you are. And this book, Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us, is a must-read by literally everybody in America and the world, I think.
Thank you so much.
We're not the only country with these issues, but
Very true.
We have the most consciousness to change them, I think.
That's so true. And I think the reason I wanted to focus in on American patriarchy, even though patriarchy, yes, exists across the world, I completely agree. I think it exists differently in each of the different contexts where you find it. And so without understanding the founding documents of each nation, without understanding the people who wrote those documents, we can't assume that patriarchy exists everywhere identically. And I think that's one of the reasons that we haven't dismantled it, is because we're speaking about it on the global perspective always, versus thinking of if we can really be intentional about all of the places where we see it and identify it, then on a global context, we'll actually be able to make a difference. I hope this is just the first of a series of books. Hopefully we can do a French patriarchy book and a Mexican patriarchy book, and then start to see some of the intricacies of the different systems that have used patriarchy as the center of how they organize themselves.
Yeah. And, you know, we are Americans, obviously, but we are at our foundation revolutionary.
Yeah.
So it is natural for us to kind of revolutionize this next evolution of consciousness, because it is permeating all nations.
Yeah.
But, you know, this conversation will hopefully spark us evolving and
in
changing.
a lot of ways, the U.S. is a trendsetter, and we obviously take control of so many things, and we set the tone for things, whether that's through movies and books, et cetera, just because we've taken so much kind of domination and power over other places. And I do want to write a whole other book that has to do with, once you understand American patriarchy, you also understand why we've gone into so many other nations and tried to tell them how to do things, and incorrectly, sadly, in my opinion. But I think the U.S. has such influence. That's why it's so important to really get specific about how our founding fathers viewed different human beings, not only within our own country, but also outside of it.
And I think it's important. I mean, it was important for me to read this book because as much as I know about our history, I didn't know the intricacies. You know, we just we all go into our own expertise, or we all retain based on our upbringing certain things about what we're taught in history.
Yeah.
But like really we need to learn that what we're taught in history is a narrative controlled by a certain group of people.
Absolutely.
And it's not always sharing the whole story.
Exactly.
So I was having a conversation with my friend yesterday on the way home from the airport, and she was like, you know, that word patriarchy, I still can't grasp it. And she actually was born in Russia. So I would love, just since you are steeped in the work, to just explain in your terms what patriarchy means.
Yes. So patriarchy on its own, we typically define it as a system where men are given access to resources and they have control and power over women. That's typically how we define the word. It's very simple and in a lot of ways doesn't really do the work we need it to do for us to do something about patriarchy. And so when I'm defining American patriarchy, I'm not blaming any individual group of people. I'm saying, let's think about what our founding fathers envisioned for their nation. And let's go back into thinking of what they were experiencing at the time when they're writing the Constitution and they're writing the Declaration of Independence. They've just won the Revolutionary War. They were kind of this ragtag group of men, to be honest. We've all seen Hamilton. And they were very concerned that they were going to lose power in a nation that they had just fought so hard to gain power in. They see this revolutionary spirit spreading across the nation. And so they say, wait, we need to come up with a system. And they come up with one that is going to favor them, that's going to make it so that they can retain power, they can retain control. So they're writing the Constitution with that in mind. So in the Constitution, they're identifying what it means to be human in the United States. And they're only talking about really themselves. They say men get to vote, men get to own land, men get to represent themselves in business decisions. These are just some examples. They completely ignore women in the Constitution. They don't write about them at all. But we do know that they define women by letters that they write to their wives and to their daughters. They define women as those who should be docile, those who should be controlled by the men in their lives, that they should not vote. So in their system that they're setting up, there is already this binary, that there is man and that there is woman. But that binary doesn't include all men and women, actually. And of course, it excludes non-binary people, but it also excludes people who were enslaved. It also excludes their indigenous counterparts. It also excludes poor white people. They're not considering them, right, in this land ownership, et cetera. And so from the beginning, our American patriarchy has been based off of we have to define man, we have to define woman, but we also have to exclude many people from this already problematic gender binary. So everything in my book and everything in my work and in all the ways that I analyze our current country is based off of this definition of American patriarchy, which is the country we've been living in, the system we've been living in. Every law they wrote as a result of that comes from those beliefs. Every system, our educational system, our healthcare system, everything comes back to that original social order, and that is American patriarchy.
Wow, that was perfectly articulated. And there's so much to it. I mean, I have to admit, I went to public schools. White people were a minority where I was. I think it was like mostly Asian and Latino. And then, I think blacks and whites were equal and percentage-wise. And so I was always like, and I got bussed into inner cities to eat for the gifted programs or whatever. And so I was just like, oh, I'm not racist. But I really didn't learn about white privilege or become starkly aware of it until COVID.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, you're just not aware because we're all in this like fish, like swimming in the water of
Yeah.
patriarchy.
Yeah, it's so true. And we've all also been sort of tricked into protecting it and protecting that social order, because if we are told that in order to have the things that you want access to in your nation, right, you want to be able to vote, you want to be able to own land, you want to be able to provide for your family members and your loved ones, instead of us thinking of let's focus on the system that was inequitable from the beginning and was set up to divide us from each other, we've instead been tricked into thinking we're just not fulfilling the roles of American patriarchy well enough. So you'll see women thinking, oh, maybe I need to protect this social order. Maybe I need to vote for it more. Maybe I need to submit to the men in my life more. Or you'll have men who can't maybe provide for their families because societally they were not given the same access to opportunities and resources, thinking, maybe I need to control the women in my life more. Maybe that's why I'm not having given access to the things that I want. We saw it in our most recent elections with trends of Latino men, for example, voting for someone who a lot of people were surprised that they would vote for. But if you, again, understand American patriarchy and you understand, oh, but I've been told that in order to be a human being in my nation and in order to have access to the opportunities and resources that I need as a human being, I have to play one of these two roles that is presented to me, then it makes sense why so many people feel like it's innate, that it's natural, that it's divine, that it's simply our only option. But if you then think about it as a system that was built, a system that was chosen by a small group of men, in fact, you then realize we can choose differently. We can build something completely different than what has been presented to us as the only option. And so there's many of us who just think and have continued to live our lives protecting something, defending something that doesn't serve us, doesn't serve any of us.
Mm-mm. Wow. And it's so, and awareness, bringing to light is the first step in healing anything, right?
Absolutely.
And the parts of the book that I thought were so fascinating or like really profoundly, it was to learn, you point out who the founding kind of idea makers were of like our modern medical education system, or our, the Mount Rushmore,
Yeah.
or even the founding fathers and their views of women. So like the real beliefs about women or other races of these people that have established these institutions that our society runs on, and to know their beliefs in psychology, it's like, it's a fact and we can't change it.
Yeah.
But once we're aware of their driving psychology, we can go, oh, maybe these are no longer serving us,
Yes.
never were.
Exactly.
But now with new awareness and consciousness, we must change them.
Exactly. And to be aware that they were also very aware of what they were choosing, that also wasn't a mistake, that it wasn't that it was just a product of the time, and that we can just assume that that's what everybody would have chosen to do during and post the Revolutionary War. That's not true. There's actual evidence that, number one, they wanted to strategically erase indigenous belief systems, for example, that identified people beyond the gender binary, and not only acknowledged them, but saw them as the most wise amongst their people. And our founding fathers were aware of that. So they strategically put indigenous people into schools where they're trying to take away these belief systems and they're trying to erase those belief systems. So again, they were aware, a different way of organizing people. They also knew, Thomas Jefferson specifically, who spent a lot of time in France, was very concerned that Parisian women were emancipated. He did not like that. And he spoke about that a lot. And he says, we're not going to do that in the country that we're building. So he saw an example. He saw another option. And instead, they doubled down on patriarchy. In the book, I talk about how Abigail Adams, in this famous quote, she says, "Remember the ladies." She's talking to the founding fathers. She writes this letter saying, "Do better by us than the monarchy has done. Include us in the nation that you're building." And the men, specifically her husband, writes back saying, and mocks her and says, "We know better than to do that. We are building a republic of men." And so they then write like very specific laws stating that women cannot vote. So even if it might have been assumed during the monarchy that women couldn't participate politically, our founding fathers make it obvious and explicit, and they put it in law, women cannot participate politically. So we can't even say that they didn't know better and now we know better. No, they knew better. They chose it. It was not a mistake. It was not, a surprise. We shouldn't continue to be surprised by it. That is how they designed this nation. And so we all in our 2025 world need to stop saying, oh, and blaming each other for it, but instead saying, that's what they designed. Is that working for any of us? No. So let's design something different and let's stop combating each other and instead look at, like you said, how is our healthcare system still being impacted by this? How is our educational system still being impacted by this? When we're seeing even again on a national level right now that maps are being redrawn, it's all made up. It's all entirely made up. And so it gives us a lot of power to believe we can also make something else up.
Yeah, it's time to upgrade the software, people.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
All of this stuff is clearly no longer serving
No.
humanity, especially here in our country. To switch gears, because there's so much to unlock in the political, system of it all as well. And I want to get into the healthcare system because a lot of my audience is specifically, concerned about healing. And
Yes.
we need to bring that to light, that there's systems set up that we're not serving the entire population.
Yeah.
Or any of us, really. But so your mom and your dad, I'd love to know what they modeled for you to have such a healthy, I think part of healing this whole thing is really getting to heal the masculine and the feminine in all of us.
Yes.
And I know that seems like a gender thing, but it's more of just like a energetic balance within each human.
Agreed.
To, be healthy.
Agreed.
And, obviously the men have been suppressed. Their vulnerability has been suppressed, and we're conditioning people out of feeling their emotions because of what's proper, for men and women. But we'll get to that too. You seem to have had a very healthy relationship modeled for you. And then your mom's activism as a white woman was so inspiring. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for bringing my dad into it. He often feels erased in my conversation. Both of them, yeah. I would say, it's interesting. As somebody who, now I'm married, now I have my own kids, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. The complications of relationships. I now understand some of maybe...
It's real.
The conflicts I witness. I don't ever want to paint them as perfect in terms of their relationship, but the things that were really so wonderful were the ways in which they both made us aware of our history, always, how important it was to any moment that you're living in is rooted in history. And we're not all just kind of floating around. Instead, we've come from our ancestors. We've come from realities before we were here that we still have to contend with. And I think a lot of us today feel like we don't want to do that. We don't want to have those conversations. But without those conversations, not only are we unable to heal, we're not grounded. And so my parents were very big on teaching my siblings and I to be proud of our history and to be aware of it. And the way in which they also showed that collaboration every single day, they would watch the news together. And it seems interesting to answer a parenting question this way, but it was one of the most formative experiences of my life. My parents every single night would sit down and watch multiple news stations together. And they wouldn't force us to sit down with them, but it was the only thing that they would put on TV. And so we kind of had to sit there with them. And they would bring their own experiences to the table. They would say, oh, this is happening. And I remember, my dad would say when I was a little kid in Ghana, and I remember the history of what was happening in that nation. And then my mom would say, that's fascinating. This is what I think about that. And they would have these really healthy dialogues around what they were witnessing around them, always making us aware that we had a role to play in our larger world, that we didn't separate ourselves from that context. And so in addition to that, they also taught us how important it was to voice our opinions and also be prepared when you were going to voice those opinions, have the evidence, have the receipts, and engage in dialogue in that way and celebrate your differences within each other and not believe that we all had to agree with each other in order to love each other and coexist with each other. And so the next stage of that was they took us to places all around the world. They prioritized us seeing things firsthand in addition to what we were learning on the news. So this is when I became very aware of storytelling. So my parents, if they had not been to a place and a position opened up, they would apply to it and we would go and live there for a few months or sometimes a few years. So I grew up in Dubai, Estonia, Sweden, Azerbaijan, Mexico. We went back and forth to Ghana, where my dad is from. And those are just the places we lived. And between that, it was the places that we visited and were able to see. And so they taught us from the moment we were born, this world is filled with different wonderful people, different belief systems, different ways of living, loving. And there's going to be a lot of people who will tell you a certain story. And then you go to that place and you see it for yourself and you realize that storytelling is so powerful, but is also often only representative of a dominant group. And so all of those experiences, my parents were modeling the importance of how we think about the world and our place within it.
Amazing. That's fascinating. And what a gift. I just find that we all kind of are given the exact set of circumstances and experiences to kind of help what we came here to do.
Yeah.
Flourish and express, and you're just such a bright, brilliant human that was given these experiences because you were chosen to, share this information and help heal.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here because I've often wondered in this conversation around repair and reparations and with especially, ancestors of slaves or with
holders. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's obviously a societal trauma, but just the nervous systems of certain groups, like people of color and women.
Yeah.
I want all of the things that we see in politics and the divisiveness and the violence, and it's all symptoms. And how do we get to the root and heal kind of the nervous system so that people can have the courage to stand up and change things? Or do you know what I'm asking?
Such a good question. No, I completely agree. And I think it's on all sides of whether it was a family who experienced trauma as a result of someone trapping their family and separating their family and, all of these things, or the descendant of somebody whose family was the person doing that horrible thing. We know that trauma exists on both sides of that. And without ever being able to confront something directly, we can't heal. It's the same as a body wound, right? If you have a cut on your leg, but you keep pretending that cut isn't there, or you keep just kind of patching it with something rather than healing it, rather than addressing it, we can't move forward. And that's what I see on a national level. There is some shame, there is some embarrassment, I think, at times. I think that there's some guilt. There's very real pain for so many Americans, if not all Americans. And there's a fear of just saying some really bad things happened. And in pretty recent history, this is not that long ago either. Can we talk about it? Not by saying, hey, I'm not pointing at someone directly and saying, you did this, but I am saying you benefited from this. There are things that you probably inherited, right? Whether it's wealth or, a building or a family business. And if you're aware that that was in any way entangled with hurting another being, hurting another family, is there a way we can think about how do we heal that right now without you having to feel like I did something wrong? No, but you could do something great. You could be the person in your lineage that says, I acknowledge that painful things have happened, and I want to do my part to leave this nation and this world better and more loving and find more healing. And that's what I'm asking, is what role can we play to make things better? And to, again, always situate ourselves back in the context of history. And I tell this story a lot, but I just think it really is illustrative of the youth of our nation, because we cannot claim that we don't remember certain things. We just can't do that. For example, when I did my graduate degrees at the University of Cambridge, the first day I was there, they gave me this pullover that said, established in 1209. The university was established in 1209. And I'm looking at the number thinking, I guess that's true, but it just made me realize how young the United States of America is. And in a way, that's actually something for us to be proud of, because I think we've made incredible progress considering the youth of our nation. But we can only continue to make that progress if we stop pretending that we don't remember very recent history. In my first book, I talk about the mothers of MLK Jr., Malcolm X and James Baldwin. They all were born early 1900s, around the early 1900s. Two of them live until the late 1990s. So James Baldwin's mother was born in 1902. She lives until 1999. So she overlaps in her life with Harriet Tubman on one end and then with me on the other end, right? That's how recent this history is.
Wow.
And so we cannot continue to live in these delusions of, oh no, Jim Crow wasn't that bad. Slavery didn't happen. No, it did.
Not that long ago, yeah.
We have to acknowledge that. Stop feeling like anyone is saying to whoever is listening, you were the one who had slaves. And we're not saying that, but we are saying that, of course, with this recent history, it's played a role in all of our lives today.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple. So now let's address that system so we can all move forward with healing.
One of the simplest yet most powerful things we can do for our health is reconnect with the healing frequency of sunlight. Therasage's infrared sauna and red light PEMF mat give me that daily dose of nourishing sunlight in the comfort of my own home. The infrared heat from the sauna helps my body sweat out toxins stored deep in my tissues, ease sore muscles, and calm my nervous system. The red light supports cellular repair, reduces inflammation, and even boosts my mood. It's like getting nature's medicine delivered through modern technology. I love that every Therasage product is designed with such aligned intention, something you don't always find in the wellness world. I did a fascinating podcast episode with the founder of Therasage, Robbie Bessner, if you want to learn more. To experience the healing frequency of light for yourself, Therasage is offering 25% off to our Heal with Kelly community. Just use the code KELLY at checkout on Therasage.com. That's KELLY at THERASAGE.com. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always something that we can do more, and we all have our corners of the garden that we can tend to, but these conversations are necessary in order to go, because, in my personal life in the last 6 years, I felt overwhelmed and drowning in my own personal dramas,
That's real.
And early motherhood and all of these things. But I'm dedicated to becoming a better human every day. I've been doing the work. I mean, all of my work is about helping relieve the suffering of others. But this is such a huge conversation, because I often wonder, I'm like, there's so much deeper going on. And my work is kind of reconnecting people back to the truth of who they are. And my belief is that we're all divine expressions.
Beautiful.
There's no color, race, gender, but in that definition, it's like we are all here as expressions of consciousness in all its beautiful, crazy forms. And, we're all here to kind of contribute and evolve as souls.
Yes.
And so it's like wild. And I catch myself falling into the 3D, being human, and getting super judgy and annoyed with any type of person.
Yeah.
Any age, any color, any gender, or non-gender. But then if you pull back out, it's just like, we are all innately just divine expressions that look different and have different experiences.
Exactly.
And to have these conversations and recognize, even in the talk of the people that are in prisons, given their set of circumstances, I would have chosen and done exactly what they would have done
Right.
to let them, but I didn't have their upbringing or circumstances or ancestral trauma or whatever it is, you know?
Mhm.
So I just really want to restore the humanity in humanity.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And it's because, yes, as a sociologist myself, we know gender, race, it's socially constructed. It is. But we can't arrive at a place yet where we say, yeah, but those categories shouldn't exist, because it's like the harm has been done by the categories. And so in order to heal the harm, we have to acknowledge the categories that were built while also saying these are constructed. It's true. They aren't real. But at the same time, they've caused real pain. And so in the book, I talk about how even the idea of whiteness has expanded to include certain groups so that more power could be held in the hands of a white group. But obviously that makes it so clear how arbitrary it is, how unsophisticated it is. And I do hope we can at some point arrive at a place where we return to whatever the original nature of humanity was. But sadly, because of the history of groups of people feeling they had to divide people, that they had to create hierarchy, we've now seen that play out in horrific ways that are continuing traumas. And then you have people claiming, oh, but those categories, now we have to talk about the categories. We're at a point where we have to. But while keeping at the core of it, yes, we are all divine beings. We all deserve dignity. We all get to live as human beings. That's what we should have access to. And that's what we're asking for. And so if we're looking at our nation and you see a foundation that did not acknowledge that divinity in each of us, that did not acknowledge what we each deserved, can we go back to that system and say, but what if it did? So when I'm talking about the shifts that sort of need to happen for us to get there, I'm not ever actually saying that the opposite of American patriarchy is a matriarchy. I'm not saying that if I am critiquing a system where one group of people has power over another group of people, that the way I'm going to fix that is just to put a different group of people in power. No, I'm saying that I'm actually advocating for American democracy. We haven't yet seen that in reality, because democracy says that power is vested in the people, all of the people of that nation. But if we haven't ever been seen, all of us, as people in that divinity, with the dignity and respect that we deserve, then we haven't experienced American democracy. And so the opposite of American patriarchy is democracy, where each of us are given power, where our voices are heard, where our needs are met. How beautiful would that be?
You married a man, a Black man who was like the youngest mayor of, I think, of Stockton.
Yeah.
And you have 3 beautiful kids, back to back. I don't know how you did it. You're in it. Your oldest is almost
6 in October.
My only age. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
But I, in my own version of motherhood, and I'm just in awe of or I'd love for you to share how you and your husband, how you are able to not feel like you're sacrificing any area as his wife and working and so capable, and then raising 3 kids, because I often struggle, and maybe this is my brainwashing of the patriarchy, that we have to do it all, but I'm so hard on myself, maybe in my work I'm not paying attention to my daughter as much, and now I'm separated from my husband, and maybe I wasn't a good wife, or whatever we put on ourselves. How do you and how does your husband support that democracy in your relationship?
Oh, such a good question. So beautifully put, and such a great segue. All the things. So great. It's interesting. So my husband and I are college sweethearts. So we met very young. We still are young, but we've grown up together in a lot of ways. And so I mention that because we both were already kind of doing our thing. We had big dreams. We were, I was president of our Black Student Union on campus, and he was the president of our NAACP on campus. And at Stanford, people take these roles very seriously. And we took ourselves very seriously, but we were organizers together from the beginning. And When Michael decided that he wanted to run for city council, he's 2 years older than me. It's his senior year. I was a sophomore, which when you're in college feels like a huge difference. But I remember thinking, wow, he has such a beautiful vision for what he wants to do in life. And I knew I wanted to be a storyteller. If anyone asked me, I said, I want to write books and travel around the world speaking about them and bringing more people together to celebrate difference. I've always said that. And so we knew these were our journeys. And then we also fell in love. And so we, at every point in our relationship, would just check in with each other. Are we still able to do the things that we both have always cared about? And while his political career continued to soar, he became a city council person at 21. I think he was 21 when he became a city council person. He then became the youngest mayor of a major American city in American history.
Wow.
And we were together through all of that. I did start to see shifts, though, however, in how people were treating me, because there was this assumption, and I heard many people say it to me directly, one of you is going to have to step down. It's not possible for both of you to continue to soar. But because I study things like gender and race, I was aware of what was being regurgitated to me. And these were just roles that people were trying to place on us, boxes that people were trying to place on us to tell us, and tell me mostly, that I had to choose something different, that I had to just be the supportive partner. And there have been times where, yes, I had to, like, I moved to Stockton, for example, when he told me he wanted to run to be mayor, because it felt like if I was going to suddenly become like the first partner of a city, I should maybe know the city a little bit better. So I chose to move there. And so I'm not saying that at all times I didn't have to make some sacrifices. I do think because of these societal roles, women are so often asked to make the sacrifice, right? Even the physicality of me birthing our children, me nursing our children meant sacrifice on my behalf. But the way Michael and I always have operated from the moment we started dating when I was 19 and he was 21 was that each of our wins were each other's wins. So if I was at home with our baby and he was going to get to go speak at a conference, he better be representing me at that conference as well, speaking about the things that I'm excited about and passionate about. And anyone who meets Michael always tells me, oh my gosh, he told me all about you and your books and these and that, because that's how we see our team. There are going to be moments where, by design, I'm going to have to do some things that he's not going to have to do. But that doesn't mean that we get to forget my dreams and my goals and my path as well. And so we've always supported each other in that. It hasn't always been easy. We've had to have conversations. We've had to check in with each other. I remember a specific moment where I'd flown back in from the UK. I was doing my PhD there, and Michael was thanking some people in, like, at a speech, some event. And he said something. He didn't thank me. He just, So afterward, I went up to him and I said, hey, I always say, are you open to some feedback? That's typically how I start. If there's something I'm going to say. And he's like, okay, what's the feedback? And I was like, you didn't even thank me. You didn't even acknowledge what I've had to do in order for you to be here. And he said, noted. And from that moment on, he's never forgotten how important it is to acknowledge. So what I often say to couples, and again, we're a young couple still, we have 3 young kids, but you're not always going to achieve equality. But there are ways in which you balance that. Acknowledgement is a huge one. Cheering each other on is a huge one. Carrying each other's dreams is a huge one. And those are the factors that I think have allowed Michael and I to do, quote, all the things. But then on the personal level of how I feel with, I wish I could be in 2 places at once all the time. I love my work. I'm so grateful for my work. I'm so, so, so grateful that I get to do all the things I said I wanted to do at 19 years old. And I'm so grateful for my babies. And being their mother is the best role of my life. But I don't get to be with them all the time. And at the same time, I don't want my kids to feel like I gave something up to be with them all the time, because then you also have this relationship with them where you somehow feel like they owe you something. Mm-hmm. They didn't ask you to give up your passions. And my mom never did, right? And so that doesn't mean for me that mothers who stay at home with their children, I actually think are doing the most important work and the hardest work. I constantly am shouting out mothers who work from home, and we call them stay-at-home moms, but I just call them moms who work from home with their children. That's also still, you still have an ability to maintain your passions, though, and the things that matter most to you, right? It doesn't have to be some job outside. I'm not living in that world of the capitalist, you need to, quote unquote, produce something outside of the home. You are doing incredibly important work, but you also have to maintain what matters most to you. Yeah. So that's my long answer, but that's how you can get as close to just doing the things that still matter in your life, while also expanding that to include, for me now, it's like the play dates. They really matter to me. I want to be there with my kids for that. The drop-offs and pickups, I want to talk to their teachers just as much as I want to be on a podcast or travel for a conference. All of those things matter to me.
The moment you told your husband about you didn't even thank me. I'm like, Abigail Adams is dancing in her grave right now. That's amazing. And such a beautifully round, like complete answer. I had a moment this morning. I'm a bit of a crammer and also just juggling a lot. So I was reading, I got up early in bed and my daughter sleeps with me. And she's a very like touchy, like cuddler.
I love.
And so she starts to sense that I'm not, right next to her. But I'm in bed and I'm reading with my little flashlight, your book. And she knows now. I'm just very articulate. Like, this is a really important interview, and like this is not more important than you, but I want to be prepared. And she just crawled, like laid on top of me while I'm reading the book. And I'm like, you know what? She is looking at me, admiring, like this is imprinting in her the importance of her work and passion while still being able to have the capacity to love what's important at the same time.
Exactly.
And I was just like, this little proud moment.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Exactly. That image is so great. And it's true. And I think that is one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids. And I say to so many of my friends, I mean, they probably get so tired of me, but so much of my work is obviously based on the research that I've done and how that plays out in our mothering. The greatest gift you can give your child is that you are joyful and you are fulfilled. That's the greatest thing, that you're confident in yourself and the way you speak about what you care about and how you look at yourself. Those are the things that will allow them to feel like they're their most secure selves, because the person in their life who, and I'm thinking obviously very specifically about motherhood right now, but their first home that they come back to and always look to for guidance and security is so sure of herself, so fulfilled, takes care of herself. That's what they want to see so that they can go off into the world feeling like they can do anything and everything that they set their minds to. So there's that image of her leaning on you, seeing you doing the thing that you love to do. Yeah. It's perfect. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm going to plug this book like over and over and over. Not only do we all need to read this book because it will help us wake up to kind of this water that we're drinking that we're not even aware of.
Yeah.
But it also, like, you give readers a feeling of their inherent and collective power. Like, so you really, like, talk about, our superpowers and our intuition and to activate those things. And I don't know, it's really inspiring in that way.
Thank you.
I want to touch on, just opening my little digital notes here. The Flexner report.
Oof, yeah.
Oof. And I had, and just like basically our medical and our healthcare system was designed on a foundation that white male bodies are the standard of care.
Yep.
Everything else is inferior. It's pretty well known now that like the research is not done even on women's bodies. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the scientific research and medical research is males. That's why we're having so many, fertility and female hormone and organ related issues that are just being handled in such atrocious ways.
Menopause, pregnant, all of the things. Mm-hmm.
So I want you to talk about that and childbirth, how it's kind of been hijacked from this village midwife, beautiful, sacred, empowered, divine, ceremony to sterile, stark, and pushing drugs and surgery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I want people to be aware. I had a natural childbirth,
Mm-hmm.
but I had it in a hospital, but I tried to labor at home as long as possible.
Yeah.
My doctor was a white male, but he was very in tune, and like he
Beautiful.
holds space for females to do their thing.
Yes.
And I had a doula. I had to meet my husband halfway because he felt safer in a hospital.
Oh.
And maybe ultimately psychologically I did too, but I had big dreams of doing a home birth.
Yeah.
And you did 3, I think.
Yes. 1 at the hospital, unmedicated,
Okay.
and then 2 at home. Oops.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah. So and again, every birth, no matter how it comes in, is phenomenal.
Huge and amazing.
And huge and beautiful.
Yeah.
So there's zero judgment here. But
Yes.
again, the awareness around the foundation on what some of these practices that are widely accepted, the mentality where they came from,
Yes.
might help
People
women
know.
choose differently.
And I think it's so important. For me, I always say, yes, the way in which we bring children into the world, regardless of, like you said, all these other factors, is incredible. It is holy. It is divine. It is the most magical thing. So yeah, we're never trying to rob from that experience. And parents are making the decisions that feel best for them with the information that they have. And so I want us to arrive at a place where every person feels they were given the information they needed to make the most informed decision. Because so many of my girlfriends who have given birth later say, I just didn't even know. They were telling me something about, oh, we can't hear the baby's heart, or the baby's in distress, things like this that are actually very typical in birth. But then they felt that they needed to make a call or a decision. And then they later find out, oh, that was a normal thing. And so for me, I give this answer with that in mind. I simply want people to know the information and then be able to decide what will be best for them, so that when they go through that experience, they come out on the other side feeling like, yes, I made the decisions that were best for me. And in the book, I explain there's so many different pieces of information that I include in there. The motherhood reproductive chapter is very long. It's a whole part 3 of the book. But to summarize it, I think we can talk about 3 men. One is the father of modern medicine, Flexner, who you mentioned. Then there's the father of gynecology, J. Marion Sims. And then there's the father of obstetrics. And I can't remember his name currently right now. But all 3 of these men, particularly around women's bodies, they believed that women's bodies needed to be controlled, that women's bodies were deficient, and that women's bodies needed really the input of men, because at the time it was mostly men who were practicing medicine. And when the Flexner report came out, Flexner was trying to figure out how to make a more what's the word? A medical system that was more uniform. Yeah. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you so much. And so he makes certain decisions. So he says that he's going to shut down certain medical schools. A lot of the ones that he shuts down were educating Black people and were educating women. So as a result of him wanting this uniformity, that on one hand was a good thing. We needed more uniformity. That was true. But the way in which he decides what gets to be the uniformity, he sets it up in a way where white male physicians are the ones who are in charge, and that the white male body is the one that we're all going to see as the example of health. So by design, anybody else then defaults into being seen as diseased, or being seen as having a problem that needs fixing. We then see with the father of gynecology, the way in which he becomes the quote father, and it's pretty, I guess, ironic that you have a father of gynecology and a father of obstetrics. It doesn't really make sense. Why don't we have mothers of that? But the father of gynecology gets this title because he experiments on women and girls who were enslaved without giving them anesthesia. So he's cutting directly into their bodies to perfect his procedures. He's having people come and watch while he's doing this so that he can show the female anatomy, right? And again, treats them as animals. But his way of thinking about bodies then becomes the way we actually still think about these procedures. And then the father of obstetrics, he believed that midwifery in particular was dirty, unsophisticated, and that birthing women needed to be in hospitals. Even though midwives had been the experts in this right from the beginning.
Millennia, yes.
And also midwives were very willing to share their wisdom with doctors who came and said, we want to take over. And so at the beginning, when we transitioned in the United States to women giving birth in hospitals, you see a rapid decline in birth outcomes. And you see women dying, you see babies dying because of all of this experimentation versus seeing this body, this birthing body, as knowing what it needed to do, as women really connecting with their intuition, hearing from elder women who are guiding them through the process, it becoming a community thing where other women are surrounding them, and medicine isn't really all that necessary. And so it then transitions in the US. We then become seen as, again, from the beginning, default disease, right? So women come into hospitals and they're put in wheelchairs. Why? Doesn't really make sense. Women then are put on.
So true. Why?
Who knows? Women are then plugged up to IVs. Not really necessary. Keeps you from moving. Doesn't really make sense. If a woman throws up during her labor, which is very normal. I threw up in my first labor. If I didn't have my doula there with me, though, to tell me that's normal, the nurse was very ready to give me some kind of medicine to keep me from feeling nauseous. I would have then felt more drowsy during my labor. So it's all these things that were seen as normal, natural parts of labor are then over-medicalized. They are treated as very extreme. And the thing that we have in common between all of these three men is that they thought women's bodies needed to be controlled. They also saw labor as damaging to both women and children, and that they could be the ones who could solve the problem and make it less damaging. So one of the methods I talk about in the book that became really popular was drugging women who were birthing so that they wouldn't remember the experience. And then the evidence came out that these women were thrashing and hitting their heads against walls. The babies were born drugged, but it was advertised to everybody as, we have perfected labor, us men, and made it easier. So women, just come, you're just going to sleep and the baby will be here when you arrive. And only the nurses and doctors knew what was really happening behind these closed doors. And so it all plays a role in how we still see birthing bodies to this day, and why we have such a high maternal death rate in the United States. It's something that affects all people, all women in the United States, but it disproportionately affects Black women. Mothers are dying at extremely high rates in the United States, and the data shows us that we could solve this and save women's lives, save babies' lives, if today we embraced midwifery just as much as every other industrialized nation does. Mm-hmm. But in the US, we're still told this propaganda that midwives don't know what they're doing, that they're not medical experts, and that all women need medical intervention. Mm-hmm. When we do need medical intervention, we are so grateful for it. Absolutely. There are certain procedures that have saved lives. And again, I've heard of many friends who, yes, they needed medicine, they needed intervention. In those cases, wonderful. But when it is not necessary, it has created so much more pain. It has created doubt in women because in order to control this process, women then have to believe themselves that they don't know what they're feeling, that they don't know what decision to make for themselves. They need some other authority to tell them. So you have women who have never given birth saying, I'm afraid to give birth. I don't want to experience that pain. So it's fearful from the moment we're even thinking about it. And so I was really grateful. The reason I made these decisions to have a doula, to have a midwife, is because of my first book. I was researching the treatment of motherhood in the US, and specifically the treatment of Black motherhood. And I realized the data is clear. If you can have an unmedicated labor with a midwife at home, your recovery is much faster. Your baby tends to have much more consciousness faster. You yourself have this empowered experience where you then, as a mother, even after you've gone through the labor, you're feeling like, I know what calls to make. I'm confident in myself. My intuition is telling me what to do here. And when you talked about laying with your daughter, we're told in American medical systems not to cuddle with our kids. We're told don't co-sleep with them. You might hurt them. Don't pick them up when they're crying. You're going to coddle them too much. Put them on a feeding schedule. So you have mothers who, I have seen so many babies, they're crying and moms are looking at their watches or looking at their little apps on their phones. And I mean parents, let me not just make this about moms. Parents saying, oh, well, we have still 10 more minutes on here. The child is crying. Just pick up the child. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I parent from a lot more intuition and what just felt right to me. It always felt right to me for my baby to lay on my chest. I felt I could hear them breathing, so I could sleep. Versus if they were in a bassinet, I kept getting up, trying to check. And so I'm not saying everybody makes those decisions. There's some people who are like, baby on my chest, I can't sleep that way. So choose what works for you, but listen to your intuition and be aware that there are years of history behind this that are intent on making you feel like you don't know what you're doing and you need somebody else to tell you. But all of that is strategic and all of that was by design. And I know this is a very long answer, but the very last thing I'll say about this is even doctors who are women, doctors who are people of color, they have been trained in the system. So they also believe that your body needs medicine and your body needs control. And you'll see, and you can look up these stories. There are OBs themselves who are women who then, once they've gone through the process, realize this is not how this should have gone. This system isn't working. And so I advocate for more concurrent care, more midwifery, more doulas. And if you still want to see a doctor because you're somebody who thinks, what if something goes wrong? I did that with my second too. My second and my third, I had a doctor. And I would also go and see them mainly because I found it interesting as a researcher to do both. But yes, so that's a very, very long answer. But like you said, it's so important. And it's related to everything that comes after that birth experience.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's the perfect way to wrap up because, in the 9, now 10, healing essentials based on Kelly Turner's research that were in Heal. And her research was specifically for cancer, but I think it applies to all chronic illness and now just Healing Society as a whole. The first and foremost thing that I am trying to cultivate is really tuning into your intuition. And we've forgotten how to do that. We've conditioned out of that.
Absolutely.
Men, women, all humans. And so to become aware of this, and like you said, to become aware of the systems that have indoctrinated doctors of all colors and genders, it's that conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not even aware that we're operating in that system. So again, read this book so we can wake up and be aware. And then I've been trying to cultivate people's intuition through connecting with nature and quieting the mind and meditation. And now I'm like, oh God, I've got to wake them up to the patriarchy too, because it keeps them disconnected from their own superpowers and intuitions and feelings. And that's my whole current work is teaching people how to feel again.
It's so true, because I think the thing that really has robbed us of that feeling, I would argue, is this patriarchal system. From the moment we were born, we were told you got to get on a schedule. And the thing is, kids especially, all they know is intuition. Mm-hmm. Newborn babies, that's it. They're hungry, they cry. They want to be held, they tell you. Yeah. That's intuition. And as parents, we should be leaning into that rather than from the beginning being like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because the clock told me differently. Right. You don't know. Right. Get on the schedule, right, for productivity. And I don't necessarily blame parents for that because, again, in the U.S., we don't have things, like parental leave. So parents do actually really need to get their kids on a schedule because they're going to have to go back to work soon. We don't really have a lot of the systems in place that would allow us sometimes to hear our intuition a little bit louder. But it is the most, I mean, I have multiple tools that I say and I identify in the book that have been taken from us, and the things that have been hidden from us by American patriarchy. But one of the most important ones is our intuition. Because if we can listen to our intuition, there are so many things that this system tells us are true that we would just feel and know are not. And we would have more of these reactions that say, that doesn't feel right to me. There must be something else available to me. There must be some other option. And I know we're wrapping up, but when I was pregnant with my third, I went to go and find a doctor for my concurrent care. I'd switched insurances, so I needed to work with a different doctor. And I saw a doctor, and she told me that she would not be my doctor if I wanted to also see a midwife. And I said, why? What's the problem with me wanting to have concurrent care? And she said, that is against our policy if you're going to be seeking medical advice somewhere else. And I kept asking her, I kept pushing. I said, so you want to be the sole authority over my decisions. You don't want me to question anything that you say. And you don't want me to come to you with my own information saying, but could we try this? Or can we do this? Or please don't do that. And she said, I've said what I said. It's against our policies. We cannot see you if you are also going to be seeing a midwife. There's such a need to control us. And intuition and reclaiming your intuition and all the work that you do is the first step of saying, I feel like there's a different way of doing this. Something is telling me what feels wrong and what feels right. And I'm going to trust that.
Mm-hmm. And just like on a very simple, basic level to leave the audience with, and you talked about it a little bit, like whether you're a parent or not, like, or whether you're a working mother or not, like do those things that light you up. If you can attune to your energy, that's part of your intuition. It's like we are generators. We can generate our own joy by doing things that light us up. And it's the same with intuition when you are in a group of people or seeking a doctor. Tune into, am I feeling lit up and expansive, or am I feeling contracted, drained, and like agitated? And just exercising that muscle, we can start to go, oh, wait, no, I have autonomy over my life and I can choose. I actually am the patient here and should be choosing my doctor that gives me the best chance of like being able to ask the questions and feeling safe.
Exactly.
And this is like, if we can, inspire people to cultivate that in themselves, we can start to change because everybody's going to start questioning and changing in these little micro moments.
Exactly. I completely agree. And you then, and to take it all back full circle, you're then much less likely to reproduce something that didn't serve you from the beginning. Because if you're listening to yourself versus the system, I really believe that most of us would make very different decisions and that we would actually acknowledge our interconnectedness to each other. We would actually acknowledge the importance of vulnerability, right? If we think, for instance, of a little boy who hasn't yet been told that the system needs you to toughen up and that you cannot cry and that you must be dominant, but instead they're just the little boy who gets to still access their intuition and cries or plays with dolls or wants to paint their nail. Like, who cares? Like, that is the world we could live in. And so in the final part of the book, I talk about how if it was the different world that I'm envisioning, there's just small shifts. It's not this huge overhaul, actually. Those small shifts can happen immediately. You could start right now. Just hear yourself, right? Try to hear yourself better. Do the exercises that help you hear yourself and that will naturally lead to how you see other people around you. Whether you have kids or not, or you're in a relationship or not, or you with your friendships, with your siblings, with your parents, then on your community level, your neighborhood level, and then the kind of final level of that is how you vote. What are the things that you think on a national level, when you're listening to yourself, the humans in this nation deserve? And I think we would live in a very different nation as a result of that.
Well, everybody who's listening, please do us a favor, but do yourself a favor and order. And please read Erased because it starts with us. And secondly, and finally, when is Anna Malaika Tubbs running for president? Because that's who I'm voting for.
That is so kind. I don't know. People ask me this a lot. Now I'm thinking I should add that into my list of things I want to do.
Start to cultivate that direction because you're so well-versed and you clearly are in your heart and brilliant mind. And I just thank you for the work you do.
Thank you so much for this interview. Every question was so beautifully put. Thank you for having me.